They say blood is thicker than water, but what happens when that very blood turns against your happiness? I always believed my brother Daniel had my back. After all, we were raised by a single mother in the bustling city of Port Harcourt, clinging to each other like orphans in a storm. We survived hunger, rejection, and humiliation. But nothing could have prepared me for the day he tried to destroy my marriage. And when he crossed the line, I crossed it too. Only this time, I crossed it with both eyes open and fire in my heart. My name is Amaka, and I met Alejandro during my NYSC posting in Abuja. A quiet, soft-spoken Colombian engineer who had been in Nigeria for nearly 3 years, working under a multinational oil servicing company. He wasn't flashy or loud like the men I'd grown used to. He didn't take selfies with bottles of moat or speak in slang I couldn't decode. Instead, he brought me homemade arepas, asked about my mother, and listened. We got married within 8 months. Simple court wedding. My mother was skeptical. Of course, you sure say now love be this, Amaka? Or he just won't get paper? But Alejandro never even hinted at needing help with immigration. He already had a long-term work visa, and his company handled all his legal documentation. Still, I understood the whispers. I ignored them because I knew the man I married. But Daniel didn't. My elder brother had always been overprotective. After Dad died in a motor accident when we were children, Daniel stepped into the role of man of the house. That meant interrogating any guy who even looked at me, managing our meager finances, and warning me about users. At first, I appreciated it. But as I grew, I realized Daniel's protection came with a cost: control. He wanted to decide who I loved, where I lived, how I lived. When I told him about Alejandro, he was distant. At first, he smiled politely, pretending to be happy. But behind the scenes, he started digging. How long he been here? What company? He dey renew him papers? At first, I laughed it off. But Alejandro wasn't amused. Why does he ask so many things about my work permit? He asked one night while we were folding laundry. I brushed it off. That's just Daniel being Daniel. But it wasn't. 3 months after our wedding, Alejandro received a letter from the Nigerian Immigration Services. A routine check, they called it. Something about inconsistencies in his work permit details. His face went pale as he read the letter. This doesn't make sense. I submitted all this already, he murmured. He went in for questioning. Twice. They combed through his documentation like they were looking for dirt. The second time, they held him for 5 hours without allowing him to call anyone. They asked why he married a Nigerian. If he had paid me. If we were running a visa scam. That night, he broke down in our living room. I had never seen him cry like that. I left my whole life behind in Colombia, Amaka. I trusted Nigeria. I trusted you. Something wasn't right. I sensed it. So I asked a favor from a cousin who worked with someone inside immigration. The call came 2 days later. Your brother Daniel was the one who filed the report. He said your husband might be marrying you for citizenship. Anonymous tip, but they traced it. My heart nearly stopped. Daniel? My brother? The one who toasted our union and called Alejandro our in-law? I didn't confront him immediately. I couldn't. My hands were shaking with rage, and my mind burned with betrayal. But I watched him carefully. He had resumed coming to our house, pretending nothing was wrong. Laughing. Making jollof rice with too much pepper like he always did. One night, as he told Alejandro a joke about Colombians and coconuts, I saw the smirk on his face. The mask had cracked. That night, I sat on our balcony, staring into the rain-slicked streets of Abuja. My husband sat beside me in silence. He didn't say it, but the hurt in his eyes screamed, "Why did your own blood turn on me?" That's when I made up my mind. I wouldn't cry anymore. I would return the favor. Daniel's wife, Ifeoma, had a job at a prestigious primary school, the kind that paraded themselves as British curriculum but charged outrageous fees for nothing more than flamboyant uniforms and dodgy playgrounds. She was well loved. A perfect madam teacher. But I knew something she had told me in confidence during a drunken December girls' night. Her resume? Forged. She had never truly completed her diploma. Failed her teaching exam thrice. But Daniel had helped her get the job using connections and, if I recall correctly, a little bit of bribery. She thought I had forgotten. But I hadn't. Not anymore. The next morning, I wrote an anonymous email to the school's administrator. I attached the screenshots of our old WhatsApp conversation, the part where she said LOL, "Now Daniel helped me forge all that. I was so scared they'll find out." I also mentioned she was handling children without verified certification and that it might reflect poorly if a parent found out. I didn't stop there. I sent another message to the State Ministry of Education with the same documents and her full name. I waited. And then, it happened. Daniel came to my house that Sunday, storming in like a wounded lion. His eyes were bloodshot. "You reported my wife? You crazy, Amaka?" I stared at him without blinking. "Didn't feel nice, did it?" He stood frozen. "You've destroyed her life." I smiled bitterly. "Just like you tried to destroy mine." His hands balled into fists, then relaxed. "I was trying to protect you." "No, Daniel," I interrupted. "You were trying to control me." He left without saying another word. But the story didn't end there. Because what started as petty revenge soon uncovered something darker, something that would shake both our families to the core. And this time, no one was walking away clean. The fallout from my message came swiftly. 2 days after Daniel's outburst at our house, I got a call from Ifeoma herself. Her voice was trembling. "Amaka, they suspended me. Someone sent them chat screenshots. They're saying I lied on my documents. My job, my reputation, it's all gone." I didn't say a word. I simply listened to the panic in her voice, the cracks in her composure. She hung up, perhaps sensing the truth. For a brief moment, I felt justified. Balanced. Justice had been served, an eye for an eye. But revenge is a tricky thing. It doesn't just stop when you want it to. A week passed, and the silence between Daniel and me became louder than screams. No phone calls. No Sunday visits. My mother tried to intervene, but I kept my lips sealed. She would never understand. Then came the real blow. One afternoon, as I was locking up my boutique, a stranger approached me. Thin, dark-skinned, with darting eyes. He asked if I was Mrs. Amaka Alvarez. I nodded. He handed me a sealed envelope and walked away. Inside was a printed set of messages, screenshots again. Only this time, they were from Alejandro. They showed a series of flirtatious texts with a woman named Melinda, a colleague from his office. Some were innocent, but others? Suggestive, playful, and undeniably inappropriate. My throat tightened. The ground beneath me shifted. Was this Daniel again? Was he spying on my husband now? I confronted Alejandro that night. He didn't deny it. "It was a mistake," he said, his eyes cast down. "I didn't sleep with her. We were just talking." I was confused, everything with immigration, your brother, I was spiraling. "And you found comfort in another woman?" "No." I messed up. But it was never physical. The betrayal cut deeper because it came after everything I had fought for. I had destroyed my relationship with my brother to protect Alejandro, only to find he had been emotionally straying. Even if nothing happened, trust had been cracked. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Instead, I told him to sleep on the couch and left the room. Later that night, I lay awake thinking, was Daniel ever wrong, or was he just cruel in his way of showing concern? The line between love and obsession, protection and punishment, it had blurred completely. The next day, my mother called. Her voice was heavy. You and Daniel need to fix this before the damage becomes permanent. But it was already too late. Because something even darker was about to unfold, something that would drag up secrets none of us were ready to face. Daniel didn't just ruin my marriage. And I didn't just ruin his wife's career. We had both planted seeds that were about to bloom into poison. And when the truth finally came out, none of us would be prepared for what it revealed. I should have stopped there. Walked away. Let silence be the last word between Daniel and me. But pride is a cruel master, and pain is an even worse teacher. The next blow didn't come from a phone call or anonymous tip. It came from the hospital. My mother collapsed one afternoon while fetching water from the compound tap. High blood pressure. The stress had been building quietly for months. She was rushed to the clinic, and when I arrived, Daniel was already there, pacing, red-eyed, broken. We didn't speak at first. We just sat on opposite ends of her hospital bed as the foredrip clicked rhythmically between us. She opened her eyes later that evening, groggy and weak, and said the words neither of us wanted to hear. I raised 2 children to protect each other. If I die, and you're still fighting, don't come to my grave. Her voice shook as she spoke, and her words settled in the air like ashes. Daniel left the room first. Later that night, as I helped her sip water, she whispered, "You think you hurt Daniel's wife and it ended there? That school was her whole life, Amaka. She can't even go to church without shame now." I wanted to defend myself. To scream, but Daniel started it. But I couldn't. Because she was right. This wasn't about who threw the first stone anymore. It was about who kept the war going even when it scorched everything. A few days later, Daniel came to see me. Alone. No rage in his eyes this time. Just a strange mix of shame and sadness. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "I didn't trust your judgment. I let fear ruin things. I stayed quiet." He continued, "When Dad died, I promised myself I'd protect you no matter what. Even if it meant being the bad guy. But I didn't realize I'd become exactly what I feared, someone who causes harm in the name of love." I looked up at him. "And I became the kind of woman who returns evil for evil. You ruined Alejandro's peace, so I ruined your wife's career." He chuckled bitterly. "So where does that leave us now?" "Wounded," I said, "but maybe wiser." We sat there in silence. No hugs. No big apologies. Just the kind of quiet that comes when 2 people finally understand how deeply they've hurt each other. Later that evening, I sat down with Alejandro. "I want honesty," I told him. About everything. He admitted the flirtation had become emotional. That he had leaned on Melinda during the immigration storm. He felt alone, betrayed, uncertain of his place in Nigeria. He had tried to bury it, hoping it would pass. But secrets, like seeds, grow in the dark. "I never meant to fall," he said, "but I did lean." We agreed on counseling. Not because we were perfect, but because we wanted to rebuild from the wreckage, brick by honest brick. In the end, what tore us apart wasn't just betrayal. It was pride. Secrecy. Assumptions. But healing isn't loud. It doesn't come in grand speeches or viral apologies. It begins in quiet decisions, the choice to forgive, the courage to confront, the strength to stop the cycle. But just when I thought everything was finally settling, a letter arrived. One that revealed a truth none of us were prepared for. A truth that had been buried in my family for decades. And when I read it, I knew. This story wasn't just about revenge. It was about legacy. The envelope came from a law firm in Enugu. It was addressed to me and Daniel jointly, our late father's full name stamped at the top. At first, I thought it was another inheritance scam. Nigeria is full of them, fake lawyers, mysterious lost wills, relatives from nowhere. But this one felt different. Clean. Professional. Heavy. Inside was a legal document, a revised version of our father's original will. One that had been filed a year before his death but never brought to light. It revealed something I never expected. Daniel and I were half-siblings. Our father had a previous wife. A woman he married in secret during his university days in the north. They had a child, Daniel, before the marriage collapsed. When Dad returned to the south and met our mother, he buried the past, never revealing the truth. The will explained everything. That Daniel had always been loved like a true son, but he carried a pain even we couldn't see, a hidden knowledge of not fully belonging. And our father's final wish? Let the truth not divide them. Let it heal them. I stared at the letter for a long time. Everything began to make sense. Daniel's fierce protection. His control. His refusal to trust anyone I brought into my life. He wasn't just a brother trying to be a father figure. He was a son who had spent his life proving he deserved to be part of ours. When I showed Daniel the letter, he didn't look surprised. In fact, his shoulders sagged, as though he'd been carrying the secret his whole life. I found out when I was 15, he confessed. I overheard Dad and Uncle Chinita talking. I didn't want you to know, didn't want you to treat me differently. Tears filled my eyes, not from betrayal, but from heartbreak. All those years, and I never noticed the weight he carried. His need to protect me hadn't come from arrogance, it came from fear. Fear that if he let go, he'd be left with nothing. I never hated Alejandro, he said quietly. I just feared he'd take you far from me, and I'd be alone. We both cried that day. For lost time. For wounds we gave each other. For the silence we had used as a shield instead of truth. As for Alejandro and me, we didn't fix everything overnight. Counseling helped. So did honest conversations. He apologized to Daniel, and surprisingly, Daniel accepted. Not for you, he said gruffly, but for her. Even Ifeoma found her path again. A private school out in Nasarawa gave her a second chance, on the condition she returned to get certified properly. She enrolled, determined to prove she wasn't just a fraud who got lucky. We all carried scars. But scars are reminders of survival, not shame. What began as revenge turned into revelation. Sometimes, the people who hurt us aren't our enemies, they're just broken in ways we don't yet understand. And sometimes, protecting someone too tightly can squeeze the life out of them. In the end, I learned that silence doesn't protect. Secrets don't heal. And love, real love, isn't proven by control, but by trust. So if you're watching this, wondering whether to get even, ask yourself, what are you really trying to protect? Because revenge might feel like power. But healing? Healing is peace.